Welcome to Study Buddy, meditation philosophy for the heart of your practice. Aloha everyone, so wonderful to see you. So in today's sutra, we continue inside the actor's studio with our analogy of acting and drama and the arts as a way of understanding our relationship with our true nature. In tonight's episode, you might call it, we see that when we live from our senses, or when we are compelled from our senses, when we react from our senses, we tend to get stuck in a cycle of reproducing the same movie over and over and over again. And as we know from sequels, as the movie's sequels unroll, they rarely get more creative, right? They usually get more caricatured versions of themselves. And so in our lives, as we sort of get caught in the loop of samsara, by being caught up in our senses, we actually sort of tend to produce the same movie over and over. This sutra gives us an opening, a way out of that loop, a way out of those sort of old episodes that we keep having to relive. And it comes by way of allowing our senses to, instead of become the actors and the reactors, to allow the senses to detach from our senses, and to allow them to merely be spectators, participants, witnesses of this universal drama. And as we're able to do that, as we're able to step back a little from our senses and from our mind, we find that this drama unfolds in ways, as Babaji always tells us, we could never have imagined. Let the Sanskrit reverberate within you. You're going to break it down into its key syllables. You can repeat it with me. Preksha, Preksha, Kanindri, Kanindri, Yani, Yani. Preksha, Kanindriyani. Preksha, Kanindriyani. You can say it to yourself a few times, sort of like a mantra. Preksha, Kanindriyani. Preksha, Kanindriyani. The sense organs are the spectators. The sense organs are the spectators. Such a simple sutra, one sentence, very straightforward, yet requires a lot of unpacking, to really get to the bottom of it, because it feels like what we're being given here is just a very simple command, just like this, and you have to ask yourself, well, what does it feel like? What does that mean to have the sense organs be spectators? What are they normally? Is this different than we normally live? What happens if they are not spectators? What does that look like? These are the questions that, I worked with, and I think maybe you have too if you've read leading up to this, or if you throughout this class. This image over here sort of gives you a sense of the infinite loop that is perception when we live from our senses. This will be something we're going to have to build up to, this concept in our class. This will be like the final analogy. But the idea that we just keep recreating our reality when we live from our senses, and we don't get to interact directly with our true nature as much as we should. And our life doesn't get to recreate itself as naturally as it should. That when we live from our senses, we live in a bound way, Sutra seems to be telling us. But let's build up to this, just piece by piece. We're going to break down this very short sutra, but what I found was each aspect, almost each sentence in the sutra, was so crisp, clear, and direct that it really required some unpacking, because it seemed like each sentence was a little sutra itself. Welcome back, Sunanda. Good to see you. Welcome back. I know you've been so busy lately. Good to see everybody, of course. Murali, good to see you, man. Right on. So let's start here. Sunanda, do you want to just read this first one for us? You can just press spacebar to unmute.
I'm sorry, I have a new set. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you look good, sound good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It is a yogi who discovers that this world, as universal movement, is actually a universal drama taking place.
All right. So a yogi is the one who discovers that there's a universal drama taking place. Well, what does everybody else discover? Well, I think they're stuck in the drama, right? They don't actually discover that it's a drama at all. They don't know anything's behind it, that there's any other possibilities. Well, how do we observe this drama? Well, that's pretty simple according to the sutra. The observers of this drama are our own sense organs. You know, I always find this to be sort of fascinating, because what I think we forget, we always think about this in almost like two parts, like, oh, I've got these ears and I've got these eyes and got this mouth and I'm tasting this or I'm tasting that, or I'm seeing this and I'm hearing that. But literally, like, they all come together in your experience of reality so seamlessly that you don't realize, even though you're not watching a movie right now, you're completely immersed in a movie right now. Every sense is participating. The screen is completely enveloping. It doesn't end even here. You know, it goes into your hearing, into your taste, into your feeling. That your senses, what your senses are observing, every single one of them, every single moment, is this drama unfolding. Shiva's Oscar-winning movie. It's occurring right now, and everything that you are sensing is literally you in the theater watching it. And so here's the normal experience of us. This next one. Let's see. Dharma, you want to read this one?
In this play, filled with life, with death, with sorrow, with sadness, with joy, with happiness, filled with rising and with falling. Worldly people are overwhelmed by sadness, by pleasure, by pain, etc.
So that's what we see in this movie. We don't even really see it. That's what we experience. We experience the movie as sorrow, sadness, joy, happiness, rising and falling, boredom, depression, ecstasy, whatever it might be. We have these experiences, and we're sort of overwhelmed by it. I remember Babaji saying that, you know, most people are just trying to keep their head above water in their life, and that it really, as Swami Rujananda told us, you have to really be able to almost like handle this horizontal level before you can go up and even start to look at what might be the source of this level. That when we're overwhelmed by it, it's very hard to imagine anything beyond it. We're stuck in those experiences. We're stuck in those feelings. And so this brings us to just one more slide, and then I think it might open up the door to some notes and some questions. Hey, Gita, would you read this one for us?
It is a yogi. Whoops.
So, boy, that happened quickly. That is a touchy touchpad. All right, go ahead.
Are we ready?
Yeah, thanks.
It is a yogi who discovers that the actor in this drama is only one, the interior self, Antaramat. I didn't say that right. Taking the part of so many beings, including even rocks. Wow.
So as we saw on the previous slide, normally we don't see Shiva in this performance. We see a rock. We see our computer screen. We see the wall or the tree. But the yogi discovers, through their practice, of course, not just because they call themselves a yogi, but through their practice, they discover that there's an actor behind each of these parts. And that actor is Shiva. Now, normally we're always caught in a state of accepting and rejecting, and it's really hard to see this. So, for example, when I was reading this, there was a cup of matcha on my table, and I was like, I want to see Shiva in this matcha cup. I want to see, what does that feel like? And I just was like playing with that feeling, like, is Shiva, and I really wanted to take a sip of the matcha. And I found that I couldn't really relate to this subtle quality of trying to feel Shiva in this thing in front of me because I wanted the matcha. And I was like, oh, when you're stuck, when you want something, when you just have that attachment or that rejection of it, that's all you can feel. And that's the previous slide. That's the stuck in just the experience of ups and downs, and I want and I don't want, and etc. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to torture myself here. I took a sip, and then I put it back, and then I was like, oh, now I can relate to this cup in a way that doesn't involve this attachment or rejection. And suddenly I was like, now there's space for Shiva. There's space for something higher, for something finer, for something other than just my own wants. Because as the sutras tell us, when we're going through our life just one want to the next one, we tend to get entangled in the fences of our mind and we tend to suffer. Does that open up the door for any questions or any comments for anyone? I'll just leave a little quiet space here just to let it percolate. Yeah, Nandama, go for it.
Had a question about the previous slide.
Okay, I'll pop it up. Go for it.
So is the rising and the falling part of the 5 acts of Shiva, the creation?
That's a great question, and I feel like that specifically did come up in one of the 3 translations. Give me just 1 second to pull up the actual text. Did you? Okay. Just sort of glancing through because I remember that coming up specifically. I think I remember where it came up now. It was in this is going to sound funny, and I'm not like an encyclopedia, okay? This is just, for my other presentation that's coming up next week, I was looking at the Pratyabhijna Hridayam and chapters 13 and 14, talk about, I think it's 14 that says, the easiest path to the experience of Shiva is to place your awareness in your heart and just leave it there without any other thoughts. And as a way of leading up to that practice, they said the previous, more challenging practices of Vedanta included observing the 5 acts of Shiva as a means of having the same realization. And so what I would take that to mean is that this sutra, as well as that one from the Prayabhigir Hridayam, is saying that detaching from the senses, watching the coming and the going, well, that I believe is what this sutra is compelling us to do, to become an observer, to have the senses become spectators rather than reactors to what we're seeing. So I believe that there's exactly, I keep pointing over here, it's over here, exactly what this list is implying is the manifestations of the 5 acts of Shiva. If you can actually keep your awareness detached and observe them as 5 acts and not just this experience and that experience, but rather the coming and the going and the sustaining, then yes, that would be it. That's what we're driving towards, and that is, from what I understand from the text, and that's the foundation of what we're really doing when we say we're, doing our practice, is we're observing those manifestations in order to connect with the creator, the maintainer, and the dissolver behind them, Shiva. So does that point you in the right direction? Does that feel clear? Cool. And if there's anything follow up, Anandama, before we move on.
Well, yeah, just as you were talking, I was realizing that this, at least this slide, I can't remember the other one, is more about emotions rather than our physical senses. And because I think I'm just thinking this out loud, the physical senses we can use to draw within, and these we more want to feel away from and witness. Does that sound correct?
The physical senses.
Like
repeat it for me one more time. And other people might have gotten it the first time, but I need one more.
Yes. So our senses of smell, touch, taste. Okay. When we use those to help us kind of merge and go deeper into that silent space in the heart. But this is more about, this is just supposed to be more about the emotions. And we feel them and we're trying to peel away from them and witness them rather than use them to. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna keep that in mind as we work with it, because I'm always open, and never would I assume that I've fully grasped anything about these sutras, because they're just an unfolding. But I was under the impression that we were doing that, what you're describing with emotions, to the senses here. That like this, what I'm seeing, I am detaching from. What I'm hearing, I am detaching from. Similar to how you were describing the emotions, as a way of not, what I interpreted throughout the sutra is to say that when we react to our senses, we tend to recreate them. That tends to rewrite the script again, and so that the same thing, it continually gets projected in front of us. That which we don't like, we continue to not like, but yet it gets bigger and bigger because we keep focusing on how much we don't like it. Oh, well, that's the emotion you were talking about. Maybe they're inseparable. How do things, what don't you like about butterscotch ice cream? I don't like the way it tastes. But it's creates an emotion, but it's based on a sense. But that's definitely worthy of unpacking. One of those things, it's almost like you could keep that in mind and look back through the whole sutra and potentially draw out like a a unique perspective.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. And then Gita.
Could you go back to the very first slide?
Sure. Coming up. The actual sutra.
No, yeah,
One.
the sense organs are spectators.
Okay.
This ties with Anandama's question. And I don't remember the Sanskrit word in the 8 limbs of yoga, but one of as you get toward the meditation way down on the 8, there is a withdrawal of the senses.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this makes sense to realize that the sense organs are just the spectators. They're what bring the story into my body. Because, it's kind of a silly example, but my husband and I can go hiking, and he can see all these things that that I don't see. What he brings in through his eyes, I don't bring in through my eyes. And I think there are lots. If you're a good cook, you can taste things that what the composition of the dish that people who aren't very skilled at cooking can't discern. That's another example. So this makes sense to me that if we can see the sense organs as just spectators, that they're not, that they're just bringing a story into us, is the way I interpret that. That may be not the right interpretation, but I'm reading that as that phrase, detached from the senses.
I'm just letting that soak in and. Yeah, there's definitely a tendency, I feel like, when we talk about the senses to almost want to cut them off without realizing that what they're bringing you is what I interpreted you saying is that your husband, when you go hiking, it's like he brings a different perspective on the same scene. And so if you were able, I feel like there's many different things there. If you were able to be in a really surrendered state, we might see more than what we're used to seeing. I'm not sure if that's the direction you were going. That was just something I saw. Yeah.
No, that is.
I see. So it's like our experience of reality isn't so much limited by our senses, but by our tendency to attach to certain things more than others. We're missing out on what Babaji usually sees or says is like of seeing what's possible because of our tendency to attach to what we like and push away what we don't like. But like even the very fact that you can go hiking with your husband and see 2 different realities shows you that the limitation is not in the scene, it's in your interpretation of the scene.
You said it very well.
And it's almost like that's surrender, right? Like surrender is what allows us to expand. Yeah. Because it's not about trying to look for other stuff that you don't see. How do you look for something you can't see? How do you see something? You're like, oh, I want to see what my husband sees because that was interesting. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense, right? So it's like the only thing you can do if you really were craving a bigger perspective would be to like soften, feel, and observe. And like, and in that would open the door to potentially a larger vantage point, but you're not doing that with the intention of jumping out into that when you finally see it, but rather like you're doing it for its own sake. And that I feel like is what this sutra is saying about the when you turn that awareness within, meaning you're turning it towards just the expansive quality, not the thing that that's gonna manifest, suddenly the world opens up for you, or as it says, sort of, that's the discovery of your true, that's the discovery we're seeking.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, these classes are so cool like that. There's no way any of us could open these doors in this very discussion for each other in this discussion. Like, we sort of all represent a different vantage point on the sutra, and helping each other almost like expand our perspective of the sutra. Any other hands before we keep pushing forward? Yeah, go for it, Sunanda.
I was just wondering, I'm feeling a tremendous amount of energy tonight in my heart, in my navel. And so, I'm just trying to circulate this energy. I'm wondering what the connection is between feeling a lot of Shakti and a lot of energy in your psychic system and the sense organs. Like, I'm just wondering if there's any kind of connection there.
What do you feel like the connection is based on your current experience? Like, if you don't circulate the energy, what does that feel like? And when you do, what's the difference? Take your time.
It just feels really strong. It just feels like so much energy in my heart. And if I kind of wiggle out of it a little bit, my mind might maybe try to interpret that a little bit or create a little story around it.
Right.
But then if I can, sort of get it down and around, then it feels just more like a full sort of psychic body experience. Like an opening.
I think the first interpretation is probably the easier to understand. When we don't do something with it, how you said it increases the mind's storytelling. Like, immediately that energy manifests in some way or is interpreted in some way. So I think that's, and I think we can all relate to that. And then the second half of when you do actually use your practice and put that into that circular pathway, what the energy becomes is much harder to describe, much harder to put our finger on, but that essentially, it's like we can always use that as our, almost like our true north compass. When you have energy and you circulate it and you're actually doing your practice, we'll all always continue to do it better. But when you're actually just saying, like, I'm doing that right now, and you work with it, to always remember, and to acknowledge that experience will never fit into words quite right, and that experience is so valuable to just be aware of the experience and to feel it, because it's like you're really aligning your whole compass when you can do your practice and be aware of it. It's almost like every cell of your body is getting that realignment. And so, how does that experience relate directly to this sutra? Feel free to raise your hand if anybody wants to put it into words. I'm at a loss. Yeah, Tara, go for it.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to put it into words either.
Sure.
But my sense of it with almost that what Gita was saying and what Sunanda were saying were two sides of the same coin. That when you are inside, when your focus is inside and your awareness is inside, your experience of the senses broadens so that you experience them in a way that is in harmony or dancing with the flow of the universe, with Shiva and with Shakti. So even though it expresses itself in the vision that you may take in, that your eyes can see more of the place that you're at, it's because you can see more because you are completely immersed in the moment. You are completely, the ocean of existence. Or if you're cooking, your creative energy can come through in just the right spice or the right ingredient to add because you are at one with your expression in the world. And what Sunanda was saying was that is like the inner experience that you're having. So your inner experience is this vastness and this unnameable being in the moment that doesn't necessarily need a form to manifest, as far as your being able to work with the energy of it and feel the flow of it. And I don't know if I quite said it. What I was experiencing as I was listening to both perspectives, but it felt to me like it was like a two sides of the same coin explanation of what it is to be fully immersed in the moment and a part of the flow of Shiva and Shakti and all things. And one can manifest itself through the senses in union, and one is experienced in the internal flow of the energy in Shakti.
I think in both cases we have to feel for this this experience where something's coming to us, and a feeling of some kind is coming to us, and our work is not to reach out to it. And I feel like with the senses, it's almost like that lower tattvic quality where they're much more physical, they're much more obvious. But with the energy like that Sunanda is describing, or that we all work with in our practice at different times and in different qualities and ways, it's interesting. That's a thing. It's a lighter quality tattva, but it's actually a feeling, right? You're feeling the energy, you're circulating it. It's like very interesting that it's still a thing. So it's almost like you have to have a lighter touch to work with that. But in both cases, I feel like we're doing the same work, where you're allowing something to come to you while you're maintaining a connection inside. You're really trying to stay back in your seat and allow it to come instead of reach out or react back. And it feels like with the energy we have to be even more detached and more surrendered to, but it's a similar work. Yogita.
Sometimes Baba says you get in the spiritual practice is like you get in a car to it's to take you somewhere, and then when you get there you've got to get out. I was thinking about how we use the senses to get inside. We feel the breath, we watch the breath, we look at the guru, we listen to the mantra, and all of the senses help us go inside. But then when you get there, you got to let go of them. Let's see.
That's a great point. Like, for example, with mantra, it starts louder, you feel it in the mouth. It's a little quieter, you feel it in the throat. It's even quieter, like a muttering. It's in your heart. It's silent. It's in your navel. So it's almost like the senses become less and less important as the mantra is doing its work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Usha.
This brings to mind a couple of things. To me, is the thought of Rudy and really enjoying ice cream. You know, just being and really enjoying the ice cream. And then the other one is the dharana that tells you to go back to the source of, you know, when you see the sunset or whatever, you go back to the source. So those are two things that come up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, Baba, just this last Monday, referred to watching a sunset, I believe it was, and connecting with that. So he's using the senses as spectators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just really sitting back and letting the experience come to you, and then letting yourself feel inside, because this actually brings us to this bigger analogy, or this bigger metaphor that sort of helps unpack this concept, which is that our reality is being projected from within. That's called prakasha. So this light of awareness is actually being projected from within us out. It hits a screen in front of us that is also Shiva, as we know from Pratyabhigara Hridayam. And we see this projection of reality that's coming from within us. We see it on the screen. And you know, if you're at a movie theater and you look up, you don't see the movie in the air being projected, right? So we don't see this projection. We only see the screen. And so our senses are how we observe that reality that's being projected from within us. Our senses help us observe that. Now, when we react to what's on the screen, it changes immediately the writing that's happening of this movie. This movie is being written in real time and projected in real time. And so when the person on the screen, let's say it's a scary character and you feel scared, that scary character suddenly has a little bit bigger part in the next scene, and a little bit bigger part in the next scene. Every time you react to it, the writing changes in here, the projection changes, the screen reflects that pattern. And so it gets bigger and bigger until you feel maybe anxious or scared or all those things that were from before. Ecstatic, whatever the word emotion we want to put in there. And so we find that instead of letting Shiva do the acting, we are reacting to what we're seeing on the screen, and we keep changing the writing, changing the movie. And so what we might interpret this sutra as saying is, if we just finally allowed our senses to just be spectators, to just be back in the chair and to surrender the movie, to see it as a movie, as Lakshmanju says in the sutra numerous times, then what does that do? Does that end the movie? If we don't react, does the movie end? Well, we know from the last sutra And from a pretty classic quote from Babaji at this point, because it's come up so many times in so many sutras, when we're walking through the soccer fields of Kona and we're just stepping into the present, the world doesn't fall away. We don't trip over things. We actually become more skillful walkers when we detach and witness this reality. In fact, as Babaji continually reminds us, not only does it make us more skillful practitioners, it actually makes the movie better. That's the big thing. It actually makes the movie better. So instead of just having Bad Boys 4 come out for the, or Bad Boys 14, or 27 Jump Street, whatever it is, it's a new movie. It's a fresh movie that reflects Shiva's character, Shiva's writing, and Shiva's direction, instead of our rewriting and our redirecting. And so the senses are the spectators, are the path to that. And I think, Usha, you naming that Vijnana Bhairava sentiment, and Rudy, being able to step back and enjoy that ice cream, like when you can detach from it, it gets bigger. Baba says when you step off a cliff with surrender, you go up. You don't lose the thing, you actually gain it. So yeah, good references there. Dharma, do you want to continue that discussion or go for it?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the senses and being observers or spectators, and we have a 5-month-old, so his senses are just open to experience. But there's this development of cognition, and that's natural too to us, right? Cognition is we can anticipate what's happening next, right? It's like how we survive as humans with, gravity and these sort of shared realities. And as we develop the judgments and the personality structures, and those patterns become more reinforced, like through our senses, those samskaras and those karmas really take a hold. It's learning how to work and using that surrender and transcending. That is the difference between that yogi and that innocent 5-month-old who's just experiencing the senses.
Boil that down for me just one more time. Just like, I feel like right there at the very end, it was starting to come together. Help me.
That like cognition, personality, these aspects of the karmic human equation aren't good or bad,
right?
And even that state of being a worldly person, once you know how to work, and once that surrender becomes possible, sort of like that proper use of the will starts to show itself, then enlightenment, then we're on that path to enlightenment.
Right.
And so that state of presence and enlightenment is it's further up the mountain than the experience of that sort of very open and innocent young child who hasn't, who hasn't reached those developmental stages of incarnation yet.
It's further up the mountain than just experiencing it. Yeah. Patanjali has a cool way of putting it when he says, well, this isn't exactly, he talks about the 5 states of the mind and he says, dreamless sleep appears to look like meditation, but it's not meditation because it lacks the flame of awareness. And it sort of reminds me of what you were saying where, you know, it's the flame of awareness that changes the equation, not whatever's flashing on the screen. And that flame of awareness is what defines our overall experience. But I might have missed some subtleties in there of interpreting your comment.
Well, and I'm not enlightened either, so I'm just speculating.
But the fun part of being a practitioner is that it's like I feel like we can talk about it. We can actually talk about that goal and what that means, because we can relate to it on a day-to-day level of what does it feel like to just try to expand, how much have you grown in the last year, and then looking back and being like, that's a degree of enlightenment, and not even, there's no pretentiousness there. It really is true because you earned it through your practice. So yeah, Radharani, good to see ya.
Hey, so yes, kind of going back to when you were saying the movie is a reflection of what is inside of us. We can really see it, right? But if we detach from it and we actually realize it's a movie, a reflection, you asked like, so what happens is the movie end? I wonder or maybe is that when we are able to see Shiva in that reality in front of us, which is kind of like that ultimate goal, to being able to see Shiva everywhere, or realize that Shiva or universal consciousness is everywhere. But sometimes we can't. Most of the time, I cannot see it. I cannot see that. But maybe, the movie will not end, but we'll realize that Shiva is there. And also, it made me think back of your other comment when you said that you wanted that matcha tea to experience Shiva there, right? You were saying you want to experience Shiva in that matcha cup of tea, and makes me think sometimes when I'm in that state of mind and being like, oh, how can you experience Shiva in this external world? I think I'm expecting something specific. I'm expecting to take that cup of tea and it's going to be an experience, a specific experience. So I already have an expectation instead of just letting the experience come to me without the expectation. So just a little bit what Gita was saying, the senses are maybe objective. We put judgment in it, and so we cannot experience the reality in its fullness because we already have a preconceived notion of what the experience of Shiva is going to be when I drink that tea. So that's why I cannot experience it, maybe. Like going back to what you said about the coming from Babaji, is like sometimes if we let the expectations go, we get something bigger than what we think we're going to get.
Yeah, and you don't have to not drink the tea. You don't have to not participate, right? All you have to do is just try to stay in your seat. The seat of awareness may be in the heart while the movie plays out. And that's it. And it's like, that's how we see Shiva. There's no way to actually see Shiva because his illusion is so complete. That the only way we can do it is by letting the senses just be spectators instead of reactors. Or in your case, you were saying almost like when we expect something, we've already locked in to a reaction.
Yeah, like we expect something specific. We already have like,
Yeah.
This is gonna be this way, instead of letting it be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's a great experiment, that I think as yogis we can play with in a real way, not just like, it's real. You can really just take like the next hour after this is over and you can let your sense of sight come to you. You can let your taste come to you. Maybe it's really late where you're at. You can let the toothbrush, the taste of the toothpaste come to you if you're getting ready for bed, or like you can really do this stuff, and it unveils Shiva almost instantly to a small degree. Like there's an instant shift that occurs where suddenly, at the very least, you're not making it harder on yourself. At the very least, you're not amplifying it. You're just, at the very least, it just neutralizes everything for a moment. And at the very best, it starts to dissolve stuff. It starts to dissolve things, and a feeling of wholeness rises up. And as soon as you feel that wholeness, there's a tendency for the mind to grab onto it, and then you got to start over. But nonetheless, it's so possible. It just takes a little effort over time, and of course, as real practitioners with a living teacher and a sangha and a practice, when you point your practice in this direction, it will generate results. And so hopefully this sutra motivates you to try this. You could do it anytime. And there's so much more to explore in this sutra that we didn't quite get to. So even though it's like this long, it's so short. I don't know how we only got to like half of the shortest sutra, but I mean, that's awesome. But nonetheless, if you look in this sutra, you'll find a little bit more inspiration. But I think it'll look a little clearer now that we've had this discussion. Well, and a shout out to, hey, Kat, and a quick shout out to Padmapani, who's listening to this while he's waiting on his second COVID vaccine. Way to go, Padma, for tuning in. Cool. He's on the phone. That's why he's no picture. And Kat, did you want to wrap up our discussion here?
Yeah, I just have, so I've been on a different, I have this in a different language. And in that other language, it talks about, it calls out the sutra a little bit differently, but I liked one of the things it said when it translates back into English and kind of says the same thing differently when it comes back around from Arabic to English. Okay. Sorry, that was really hard to get out. Yeah. It says that sense perception, however, is subject to error and therefore not real. What is real cannot be known for certain, and what lacks certainty is covered by nescience, which I liked because it's like, if all the senses are subject to error, then it's okay to keep retrying until we can find them and how they connect into our heart space and be able to disconnect from them.
That's a great point to remind ourselves, like, don't put all your chips in this pot of these senses. I mean, how often are we reminded of how much they're subject to error literally on a daily basis? I mean, so true.
And I just like that it's what's not real cannot be known for certain, rather than the like other way around.
That's a nice little Zen koan moment in the mind. Sort of put your mind in that space of no thought. Well, thanks, Kat, for leaving us with the Zen koan of the week. And everyone for making this such a fun discussion. Anju and Bob and Murali and Nehemiah, I know you guys didn't get to say anything tonight, but it's wonderful seeing you. And to everybody else, like, thanks for chiming in. That was one of the liveliest discussions. Like, that was so cool. Everybody was chiming in, so awesome. And yeah, look forward to seeing y'all next week. Murali and I are going to be presenting on the topic of non-doership, so that's going to be cool. And then a couple weeks from now, we'll circle back around to probably the last part of the sutra, maybe, and the next one, and it finishes our work with the acting metaphors. That's sort of, it's been fun. So again, thanks everyone for being here. Namaste. Have a great night.